He left after declaring that he didn't require a family. He saw her with a child who had his eyes 2 years later. Then everything was different. Benjamin Carter was the type of man that magazines wrote about. Intelligent and untouchable. At the young age of 34, he ascended through the ranks of New York's most influential financial elite as the CEO of Carter Holdings, a global investment corporation with clients on every continent. He was meticulous about his routine. He slept little, ate by himself, flew first class, and had no faith in anyone. He saw relationships as diversions. Family was an unaffordable weakness. According to him, love softened men, and in his universe, soft men did not exist. Olivia Raines existed in a very different reality. She was still paying off her art school debt at the age of 26, and she shared a Brooklyn flat with 2 other struggling artists. To keep the lights on, she worked as an interior design assistant at night and painted throughout the day. She exuded hope in spite of the pandemonium. Her goal was straightforward: start her own gallery, make enough money from art sales to support herself, and meet someone who appreciated her for who she was as well as her work. She believed in love, fully and without reservation, the way children believe in fairy tales. It was purely accidental that their worlds collided. Carter Holdings' new Manhattan office reception area. Light, ornamental elements were to be added over the course of 2 weeks. She never thought Benjamin Carter would ever appear, much less stand behind her one day and make a remark about the light fixtures she had chosen. "Too soft," he remarked, his voice angry and his arms crossed. Startled, she turned to see eyes that were a deep, sharp brown, so intense that she almost lost her breath. She with him. Too soft for what? For an office, or for your ego? He laughed, and for the first time in years, something cracked open in him. It wasn't just her looks, though she was stunning, with ice blonde hair and clear blue eyes. It was her courage. She didn't flinch under pressure, didn't try to impress him. She challenged him. Intrigued, he offered to take her to dinner. Strictly professional, he said. But they both knew it wouldn't stay that way. The dinners turned into nights, the nights into weekends. They lived in a bubble of stolen time, where he taught her to slow down and she taught him to feel. For 3 months, they balanced on the edge of something neither of them had expected, something terrifying and real. But just when it started to feel like something solid, something permanent, Benjamin recoiled. One quiet morning, with the golden light spilling through the windows of Olivia's apartment, he stood near the balcony with his hands in his pockets. She was still curled in bed, sleepy and smiling. That's when he said it. "I don't need a family, Liv. That's not who I am. I can't be what you need." His voice was flat, rehearsed. It felt like someone else speaking through him. She sat up, confusion turning into hurt. But he was already putting on his jacket. No argument. No goodbye. Just silence, as he closed the door behind him and walked out of her life. Olivia didn't cry right away. She just sat there in that half-sunlit room, wondering what she had missed. How someone could touch your soul one day and walk away the next like nothing mattered. She didn't know that would be the last time she saw him for a very long time. Olivia didn't hear from Benjamin again. No calls. No messages. Not even a cold corporate email. It was as if he had erased her the same way he erased unprofitable projects from his life, without hesitation. The first few days after he left, she was numb. She kept thinking maybe he would come back. Maybe he just needed time. Maybe he was scared. But time passed. And all those maybes turned into silence that filled her apartment like fog. She tried to paint, but the canvas stayed blank. Her hands wouldn't move. Her colors didn't make sense anymore. 2 weeks later, she stood barefoot in the tiny bathroom of her apartment, staring at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. She blinked, then looked again, as if the result might change if she stared hard enough. Her heart pounded, but her body stayed frozen. Everything inside her warred between disbelief and rising panic. She sat on the cold tile floor, wrapping her arms around her knees, and let the truth sink in. She was pregnant with Benjamin Carter's child. For hours, she sat there, not moving, barely breathing. It wasn't just the shock of becoming a mother. It was the overwhelming knowledge that she would have to do it alone. The man who had looked into her eyes and touched her heart had also told her, without hesitation, that he didn't want a family. She could still hear him saying it, like a cruel echo. "That's not who I am." Well, it was who she was now. At first, she thought about calling him. She even drafted a message late one night. "I need to tell you something. Please call me." But she didn't send it. She imagined how it would go. How he'd react. Or worse, how he wouldn't. What if he told her to get rid of it? What if he offered money and nothing else? What if he said nothing at all? She deleted the message and promised herself she wouldn't beg a man to be a father. A week later, Olivia packed her bags and left New York. There was nothing left for her there. Not the apartment that still smelled like his cologne. Not the streets that reminded her of him at every corner. She took the train north to Vermont, where her Aunt Helen owned a small farmhouse outside a sleepy town called Maple Hill. The air was clean. The people were kind. And most importantly, no one knew her there. It was a place to disappear and begin again. The months passed slowly, each one marked by nausea, exhaustion, and the quiet ache of missing something that never fully belonged to her. Helen became her rock, never asking questions she knew Olivia wasn't ready to answer. Together, they prepared the nursery in a spare bedroom overlooking the apple orchard. Olivia painted the walls a soft gray-blue and filled it with light, hoping her child would never feel the darkness she had known. When Jacob was born on a foggy March morning, the world seemed to pause. He came into her arms screaming and perfect, with a full head of dark brown hair and eyes so deep and familiar that Olivia gasped. He didn't just look like Benjamin. He was a mirror. She held him tightly against her chest and cried for the first time in months. Not because she was scared. Not because she was alone. But because she had never felt love this overwhelming in her entire life. She named him Jacob Elias Rains and signed the birth certificate with trembling hands. There was no father's name. Just hers. She had chosen this. She would raise him herself. Every sleepless night. Every lullaby. Every bottle. He was hers. And even when she was tired to her bones, and her hands were covered in paint or formula or tears, she never once regretted keeping him. Still, sometimes in the quiet of the night, when Jacob slept curled against her and the farmhouse was completely still, she would wonder if Benjamin ever thought about her. If he'd ever know what he missed. If he'd look into some child's eyes one day and recognize something that was once his. But she didn't let herself stay in those thoughts for long. She had Jacob now. That was enough. Benjamin Carter stood on the 57th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper, staring out at the city he once conquered with relentless precision. The skyline hadn't changed, but something inside him had. He didn't know when it began. Maybe it was after the third sleepless night in a row. Or the fifth time he closed a billion-dollar deal and felt absolutely nothing. He had the penthouse, the awards, the respect of every boardroom he entered. But lately, the silence of his own success had become deafening. No one questioned his decisions. No one challenged his vision. And no one touched his heart. Not since her. For a long time, he tried to push Olivia out of his mind. He buried her memory under 12-hour workdays, meaningless business dinners, and expensive distractions. He told himself it had been a short affair, nothing more. But the truth nodded at him during the quiet hours. The way she looked at him without expectation. The way she laughed when he was too serious. How she once painted a storm just because he said he hated the rain. She had seen through the sharp suits and polished power. She had loved him before he even knew what love was. And he had thrown it all away with a single sentence. He hadn't even realized how much he missed her until he stopped pretending he didn't. The change began slowly. He stopped accepting invitations to after-hours events. He declined vacations with acquaintances he didn't care about. He found himself looking out of windows more than into board reports. He was losing focus, and his assistant began noticing. She gently suggested he take a sabbatical, but the idea of stepping away from his empire terrified him more than the emptiness itself. So he stayed. Moving through the motions of a life he no longer felt connected to. One rainy evening in October, he attended a charity auction hosted by one of Carter Holdings' partner foundations. He wasn't interested in the event, but appearances mattered, and he needed to remind the press he was still very much in control. As he walked past a display of donated artwork, something made him stop. A painting hung on the wall, a forest in early winter, cold light streaking between bare trees, and in the distance, a small figure walking alone. The name below the piece made his heart jolt. Olivia Raines. He moved closer, eyes scanning the brushstrokes, the colors, the movement. It was unmistakably her style, raw, emotional, deeply alive. She had always painted like she was bleeding feeling onto the canvas, and this piece was no exception. The ache in the image reached into him in a way nothing else had in years. A woman near the painting noticed his attention and smiled. "Beautiful, isn't it? She's a small-town artist from Vermont. Just opened a little gallery up north. Single mom, I think. Quite the story." Benjamin felt his entire body freeze. The words echoed in his mind. Single mom. Vermont. It couldn't be. But somehow it made too much sense. When he got home that night, he sat alone in his living room and searched for her online. He found the gallery easily. It had a modest website with grainy photos, upcoming exhibit dates, and one page dedicated to the artist behind the canvas. There she was, smiling, with gentle tiredness in her eyes, standing beside a little boy who looked no older than 2. The child had dark brown hair, a serious expression, and eyes that nearly knocked the breath out of him. His eyes. Benjamin stared at the screen in stunned silence. He scrolled, hoping for a caption, something to confirm what he already knew in his gut. One image showed the boy holding a small paintbrush, smearing color across a paper while Olivia laughed behind him. It was a quiet, candid moment, so simple and joyful that it cracked something deep inside Benjamin open. He leaned back in his chair, both hands in his hair, and whispered, "Oh my God." The room felt colder, heavier. All the years he told himself he wasn't made for family. All the moments he'd said he didn't believe in love. They all came crashing down around him with one glance into a little boy's face. A face that mirrored his own. The next morning, Benjamin didn't go to the office. Instead, he booked a flight to Vermont. His assistant was shocked, but he didn't explain. He packed quickly, not knowing what he was going to say or what he would find, only knowing that he couldn't ignore this. Not anymore. During the flight, he replayed every memory he had of Olivia, her laugh in the stairwell, her paint-streaked fingers resting on his wrist, her disappointment that morning he left. He hated himself for not calling her. For assuming she'd be fine without him. For never once considering that she might have needed him. As the plane descended over the green hills and quiet towns of Vermont, Benjamin felt something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. Not the fear of failure or financial loss. This was something deeper. He was about to face the consequences of a decision he had made so easily, never imagining it would cost him a family he never knew he wanted. Maple Hill was quiet in a way that made Benjamin feel like he had stepped into another world. The roads were narrow and curved gently through hills painted with the colors of early autumn. The trees glowed with amber and crimson, and the air smelled like wood smoke and damp earth. He drove through the small town in a rented SUV, following the directions he had written down from the gallery's website. It was nestled near the edge of town, surrounded by tall grass and an old picket fence that had clearly been painted by hand. The sign out front was simple. Rain's Gallery and Studio. No frills. No grand opening banner. Just a name. Her name. He parked and sat in the car for a few minutes, unsure if he had the right to go inside. His heart thudded uncomfortably in his chest, an unfamiliar sensation for a man who had built his life on controlling every variable. But this wasn't business. This was the past crashing into the present, raw and unfiltered. Finally, he stepped out and walked to the front door, the sound of gravel crunching under his shoes unnaturally loud in the stillness. He paused with his hand on the handle, took a breath, and pushed the door open. The space inside was warm and modest, with wooden floors, exposed beams, and canvases lining the walls like windows into Olivia's soul. He recognized her work instantly. Each painting felt like a memory caught in color. A woman behind the front desk looked up with a polite smile. "Welcome. Feel free to take a look around," she said softly. Benjamin nodded but didn't speak. His eyes scanned the gallery, searching for her, not knowing what he would say when he saw her. He didn't have to look far. She appeared from the back room a moment later, holding a mug and adjusting the sleeve of her cardigan. Her hair was pulled back loosely, a few strands falling around her face. And though she looked older, maybe a little tired, she was still Olivia, still breathtaking in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or clothes. She froze when she saw him. Her eyes widened, the color drained from her face, and the mug in her hand trembled slightly before she set it down on a nearby table. He stood still, unsure if he should speak first. He could see a dozen emotions crossing her face: shock, confusion, hurt, and something else he couldn't name. "Olivia," he said, his voice low and unsteady. "Hi." It sounded painfully small, almost absurd after 2 years of silence. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she slowly walked toward him, her steps cautious, like someone approaching a wounded animal. When she was close enough to look him in the eyes, she asked, "What are you doing here, Ben?" He swallowed, struggling to find the words. "I didn't know about the gallery, about the boy." He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. His throat was too tight. Olivia crossed her arms, not out of anger, but to brace herself. "So now you do," she said quietly. "What do you want from us?" The word "us" hit him like a punch to the chest. She wasn't alone anymore. It wasn't just about her. There was a child now. His child. "I don't know what I want," he admitted honestly. I saw his photo. And I knew I had to come." Olivia didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, with calm precision, she said, "He's 2.5. His name is Jacob. And he's everything to me. You left before I even had the chance to tell you." Benjamin felt a wave of guilt so sharp it nearly took him down. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the strength in her face, the quiet resilience. She had gone through pregnancy, birth, and raising a child without him. And still, she stood here, steady, unflinching. "I made a mistake," he said. "I thought I was protecting you. That I couldn't be that man. That I'd just ruin everything if I stayed." His voice cracked slightly, and he hated how vulnerable he sounded. "I didn't realize what I was walking away from. I didn't realize it would feel like this." Olivia's expression softened, but only a little. "What exactly do you feel, Ben? Regret? Curiosity? Or something real?" Her words weren't cruel. They were careful. She needed to know. And she had every right to ask. Before he could answer, a small voice from behind her called out, "Mama." Olivia turned, and there he was. Jacob. He came running from the back hallway, his tiny sneakers thudding against the wooden floor. He had a crayon in one hand and a smudge of paint on his shirt. When he saw Benjamin, he stopped abruptly and tilted his head, studying him. Benjamin knelt instinctively, unsure if the boy would come closer. Jacob looked up at Olivia, then back at the stranger with the brown eyes that mirrored his own. "This is Mr. Benjamin," Olivia said gently, her voice tight but even. Jacob blinked, then offered him the crayon as if it were a peace offering. Benjamin took it, heart hammering in his chest. "Hi, Jacob," he said softly. "I'm really happy to meet you." The boy didn't answer, just stared at him for a long time before turning back and running off toward the back room again, as if he had decided that was enough for today. Benjamin stood slowly, holding the crayon like it was something sacred. Olivia watched him, and in her eyes, he saw something shift. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the first glimmer of possibility. Without another word, she walked to the door and opened it. He followed. When he stepped outside, she said quietly, "I don't know what this means yet. But I need time and space. This isn't just about you anymore." He nodded, unable to argue. She looked at him one last time, then closed the door gently behind her. Benjamin stood on the porch alone, holding a child's crayon in his hand like it weighed more than all the gold in his empire. Benjamin didn't leave Maple Hill that day. He couldn't. After seeing Jacob, after hearing Olivia say his name with so much quiet strength and measured pain, something inside him shifted so profoundly that even the thought of returning to his old life felt unbearable. He checked into a small inn on the edge of town, a converted farmhouse with creaky floors and floral curtains, and sat on the bed for what felt like hours, staring at the crayon Jacob had given him. It was orange, worn down, with bite marks at one end. A child's token. A child who had his eyes, his hair, his presence. A child he hadn't known existed until 24 hours ago. The next morning, after barely sleeping, Benjamin walked to the gallery. He didn't go in. He stood across the street with a coffee in hand, watching through the large front window as Olivia opened up. She didn't see him, or if she did, she didn't acknowledge it. Her movements were focused and precise, turning on lights, straightening paintings, adjusting a small display near the register. She looked like someone who had created something from nothing and guarded it with quiet daily dedication. Watching her made something inside him ache. He had missed everything. Her pregnancy. Jacob's birth. His first steps. His first words. The guilt was a physical thing now, pressing on his chest. Later that day, he sent her a message. Just one. "I'm staying in town. I don't expect anything. I just want to talk. When you're ready." She didn't respond right away. A day passed. Then two. On the third day, he was walking down Main Street when he saw her coming out of the small grocery store with a bag of apples and a bottle of milk. He instinctively offered to help, and to his surprise, she let him take one of the bags. They walked side by side in silence for a while. She didn't ask him why he was still there. And he didn't push her to speak. It was enough just to walk together, however strained the silence between them might have been. That night, she called. Her voice was quiet, controlled. "If you want to talk, come by tomorrow morning. Jacob will be at preschool." He agreed without hesitation. The next morning, Benjamin returned to the gallery, but this time she led him to the small apartment above it. It was modest and full of warmth, hand-painted walls, a few scattered toys, children's books stacked neatly on a side table. He could see the life she had built, one room at a time. She poured them both tea and sat across from him at the small kitchen table, her hands wrapped around the mug like she needed the warmth to steady herself. "I don't hate you," she began, "but I can't pretend you didn't hurt me." Her voice didn't waver. "You made a choice, a clear one. And I lived with the consequences while you continued building your empire. Benjamin listened without interrupting. He had expected anger, maybe tears, but the calmness in her voice made it worse. It wasn't dramatized pain. It was truth. Unembellished. Undeniable. I know I don't deserve anything from you, he said quietly, but I need to say this. I made that choice out of fear. I didn't know how to love someone without losing control. I thought if I stayed with you, I would ruin it. So, I left, thinking I was protecting you from me. But it was the worst decision I've ever made. Olivia didn't respond right away. She sipped her tea and looked out the window where the trees were just starting to turn gold. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer. I raised him alone. Every decision, every fever, every night he woke up crying, I was there. And I kept thinking not just about you leaving me, but about the man he might have had as a father if you'd stayed. I want to be that man, Benjamin said, not pleading, but honest. Even if I'm late. Even if it's hard. I'm not here to ask you for anything. I just want the chance to know him, to be there for him now. And what happens when you get bored? She asked, meeting his eyes. When the novelty wears off and your real life calls you back? Will he have to wonder why the man with his eyes disappeared again? He felt that question like a knife. I won't disappear, he said. Not again. I'm not who I was 2 years ago. I know it's going to take time to prove that. I don't expect you to trust me, but I'll earn it, every day if I have to. There was a long silence between them after that. No dramatic declarations. No sudden reconciliation. But something shifted, a crack in the wall, a breath of air through a long-closed window. Olivia nodded slowly and said, he loves books and airplanes. He builds things out of cereal boxes. You could start there. It wasn't an invitation. It was a trial. A path forward, narrow, but real. Benjamin didn't smile or thank her with overblown gratitude. He simply nodded, understanding the weight of what she was offering. For the next few days, Benjamin showed up at the preschool gate after class with small gifts, paper planes, puzzle pieces, picture books. He never pushed. He let Jacob decide how much space to give him. At first, Jacob was shy, more curious than affectionate. But Benjamin didn't mind. He took whatever the boy gave him, quiet glances, brief smiles, tentative questions, and held them like treasures. He was rebuilding not just his connection to his son, but the very foundation of the man he thought he was. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel powerful or successful. He just felt human and alive. Jacob didn't take to Benjamin immediately, and Benjamin didn't expect him to. The boy was cautious, observant, more thoughtful than most children his age. He would peek at Benjamin from behind Olivia's leg or the edge of a doorframe, studying him with quiet curiosity but keeping a careful distance. Benjamin respected that. He didn't try to win Jacob over with flashy gifts or forced affection. Instead, he showed up, every day. Sometimes just for a few minutes after preschool, sometimes longer on weekends. He brought small things, a new set of crayons, a tiny wooden airplane he carved by hand, a book with pages full of colorful animals. But more than anything, he brought consistency. He never missed a day. He never broke a promise. Olivia watched all of this with quiet caution. She didn't interfere, but she didn't encourage either. She let Jacob take the lead. Let Benjamin do the work. And Benjamin did. He learned how to build pillow forts and how to make cardboard rockets with only tape and imagination. He sat on the floor and let Jacob paint on his hands, his arms, even his face. He read aloud at bedtime, his voice trembling the first time Olivia allowed it, barely trusting himself to turn the pages. Sometimes he stayed after Jacob had fallen asleep, just sitting on the couch with Olivia, the silence between them softer now, almost companionable. One afternoon, Olivia found them outside behind the gallery, where the backyard had been turned into a small play space. Jacob was trying to fix a small red ride-on tractor that had lost one of its wheels. He was frustrated, his small brows furrowed. Benjamin crouched beside him with a tiny toolkit, showing him how to realign the axle. He spoke gently, explaining every step in a way Jacob could follow, his voice filled with a patience Olivia had never seen in him before. When the wheel finally clicked into place, Jacob jumped up, clapping his hands. "You did it," he said, laughing. But then he paused, looked at Benjamin with those deep brown eyes, and added softly, "Thank you, Papa." Olivia froze where she stood, a sharp intake of breath catching in her throat. Benjamin didn't say anything for a moment. His eyes widened, and something in his face shifted, shock, then something heavier and raw, like disbelief colliding with longing. He reached out slowly, not touching Jacob, but resting a hand gently on the fixed tractor. "You're welcome, buddy," he said, his voice low and steady, though Olivia could see his fingers trembling slightly. That night, Benjamin sat in his car for almost an hour before driving back to the inn. He didn't cry, not exactly, but something inside him cracked open in a way it never had before. Being called Papa was nothing like any title or award he had ever received. It wasn't power. It wasn't prestige. It was love, unfiltered, undeserved, and unimaginably precious. From that moment on, Jacob's guard dropped more and more each day. He began running to the door when Benjamin arrived, asking if he could sit beside him during dinner, offering him little treasures, a rock shaped like a heart, a drawing with all three of them holding hands, a crumpled flower he had found near the gallery steps. He told Benjamin stories about his dreams and nightmares, about the monster in the closet and the superhero he wanted to be. One night, as Benjamin tucked him into bed, Jacob sleepily whispered, "I'm glad you came back." Benjamin kissed his forehead. He replied, "Me too, kiddo. Me too." Olivia watched all of this with a heart that felt heavier and lighter at the same time. She had built walls out of necessity, out of survival, and now those walls were being taken down brick by brick. Not through grand gestures, but through presence, through effort, through time. She had expected Benjamin to try and fail, or try and leave, but instead, he stayed. Not just for Jacob, but for her, too. He helped wash dishes. He offered to pick up groceries. He remembered her favorite tea and brought it without being asked. He didn't press for affection, didn't try to reclaim what they once had. He simply lived each day with quiet honesty and patience. And she began to feel something she had thought she'd lost, trust. One Saturday, after an early breakfast, the three of them walked to the farmer's market together. Jacob sat on Benjamin's shoulders, clutching a bag of apples like a prize. Olivia laughed when Benjamin pretended to be a horse, trotting through the grass while Jacob squealed with delight. People in town began to notice. Whispers followed them, some kind, some skeptical, but Olivia didn't care. For the first time in years, she felt like part of a whole again. Not just a single mother navigating the world with a small child and a quiet ache. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the porch, Olivia sat beside Benjamin while Jacob played with a toy truck nearby. The silence between them felt full, not empty. She looked at him for a long moment and said quietly, "You've changed." He didn't deny it. "I had to," he replied. "For him. For you. For me." She nodded, her eyes shimmering with something close to peace. And for the first time in a long, long time, Olivia let herself believe that maybe some stories didn't have to end in heartbreak. Maybe, just maybe, this one had only been on pause, waiting for the right chapter to begin. Autumn in Maple Hill grew colder as October wore on. But inside the gallery, everything felt a little warmer, a little more alive. Olivia's art was changing. Her brush strokes had shifted from sharp and stormy to softer, more layered, as if something inside her had begun to heal. The new pieces that filled the gallery were still honest and emotional, but now they carried light, subtle glimmers of hope woven into every canvas. Visitors noticed. More people began to stop in. A reporter from a regional arts magazine featured her in a weekend piece titled The Heart of Maple Hill. And within days, Olivia's inbox was full of inquiries. She was surprised by the sudden attention, but tried not to overthink it. She had grown used to doing things on her own, one step at a time. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that Benjamin had orchestrated the whole thing. He had contacted the editor of the magazine anonymously, sending high-quality photographs of her work in a carefully written note, praising the emotional depth and honesty of her art. He never signed his name. He didn't want recognition. He didn't want to be a savior. He only wanted to remind the world of what he already knew, that she was extraordinary. That her talent deserved to be seen, not buried in a small-town gallery. He watched from a distance as her confidence began to grow again, as she stood a little taller during gallery openings and spoke about her work with renewed fire in her voice. One afternoon, she found out. She overheard a phone call Benjamin had stepped outside to take, his voice low, but unmistakable. He was thanking the editor for helping her see herself the way others saw her. Olivia stood frozen behind the gallery door, one hand pressed to her chest. When he returned inside, she confronted him quietly, without anger. "That was you," she said. "The article, the attention. You did all of it." Benjamin looked down, caught. "I didn't do it for credit," he said. "I did it because the world needs to see what I see every time I look at your work. I wanted you to remember what it feels like to be seen, not just as a mother or a gallery owner, but as an artist. You haven't lost that. Not even close." For a long moment, Olivia said nothing. Then she walked toward him slowly, eyes never leaving his. "You keep doing this," she said. "Not just for Jacob, but for me, and it's making it really hard to keep you at arm's length." He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just waited, breathing quietly, letting her take the lead. She stopped inches from him and whispered, "I don't know what this is or what it's supposed to be, but I know you've changed. And I know you mean it." Benjamin reached for her hand, gently lacing his fingers with hers. "I don't want to rewrite the past," he said. "I just want a chance to build something better from here." They stood like that for a while. Close but not rushed. Cautious, but no longer afraid. Olivia didn't promise anything. She wasn't ready for promises. But that night, after Jacob had gone to sleep and the gallery was locked and quiet, she invited Benjamin to stay for tea. They sat on the couch with their mugs, talking quietly, their shoulders brushing now and then. She told him about her dreams before motherhood, about the gallery she once hoped to open in Manhattan. He told her about his childhood, his loneliness, the pressure to succeed. They didn't kiss, but the space between them felt full of things waiting to bloom. The next morning, Jacob ran into the living room with bedhead and a book in his arms, climbing onto Benjamin's lap without hesitation. "Read this," he demanded, pushing the book into Benjamin's hands. Benjamin smiled and began reading, his voice soft and animated. Olivia watched from the kitchen doorway, holding her mug, her chest swelling with something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Hope. Over the next few weeks, they continued to live in the gray space between what had been and what could be. Some days were easy. They laughed together, cooked together, even managed to visit a pumpkin patch as a trio, where Jacob rode on Benjamin's shoulders and Olivia snapped a photo she'd later print and frame. Other days were harder. Olivia pulled back sometimes, haunted by the memory of being left. Benjamin gave her space, never pushing, but always reminding her with his actions that he wasn't going anywhere this time. One night, during a cold rainstorm, the power flickered and went out. Olivia lit candles and wrapped Jacob in a blanket, settling him on the couch. Benjamin built a fire in the hearth without being asked, then sat beside them. As the flames danced, Olivia leaned her head on his shoulder, and he rested his cheek gently against her hair. In the soft, flickering light, surrounded by warmth and quiet, it felt, for the first time, like a home. The townspeople began to talk, of course. Some were skeptical, others cautiously supportive. But Olivia didn't let it affect her. She had spent too long worrying about appearances. Now she cared only about the small, growing truth she was building with the man who had once broken her heart, and now showed up every day to mend it. There was no dramatic moment, no grand gesture that sealed their reunion. It happened in layers, through stories shared, dinners cooked, messes cleaned, bedtime books read, and the quiet comfort of two people learning how to trust each other again. And somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, Olivia stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. She stopped doubting his presence. She started letting him stay. Spring came to Maple Hill with a slow unfolding of color, the snow retreating into memory as green crept quietly across the hills and fields. The trees outside the gallery bloomed in soft whites and pinks, and Olivia opened the windows each morning to let the breeze carry in the scent of thawed earth and new beginnings. Everything felt lighter now, not just in the air, but in their lives. It had been months since Benjamin first returned, and though no formal declarations had been made, their little family had begun to find a rhythm, one marked not by big moments, but by the gentle accumulation of small ones. Benjamin had rented a house just down the road. Not because Olivia had asked him to leave, but because he wanted to give her space to let this new chapter unfold naturally. Still, most evenings found him at her door, often with dinner or something Jacob had forgotten at his place. Sometimes he stayed late. Sometimes he didn't. There was no pressure, just presence. On weekends, they spent hours together hiking through the woods behind the town, playing board games in the kitchen, or building elaborate pillow forts that took over the entire living room. Jacob called them castle days, and Olivia found herself laughing in a way she hadn't since before motherhood. Free. Unguarded. Real. Benjamin changed in ways both subtle and profound. He no longer checked his phone constantly. The ambition that once defined every part of him was still there, but it no longer consumed him. He still flew to New York once a month to handle company matters, but he always returned with a gift for Jacob and a bouquet of wildflowers for Olivia. He didn't try to impress her with wealth or promises, just time, consistency, and quiet care. He volunteered to fix things around the gallery, read business articles to her over breakfast, and insisted she raise her prices when a collector tried to lowball her. He saw her, not just as a mother or an artist, but as a woman. Strong. Brilliant. And entirely deserving of more than she'd allowed herself to hope for. One afternoon, as they all sat in the backyard, Jacob lying in the grass with his sketchpad and Olivia planting herbs along the fence, Benjamin approached with something in his hand. It wasn't a ring. Not yet. But it was a small silver key tied with a piece of blue ribbon. She looked up at him, puzzled, and he knelt beside her, brushing dirt gently from her cheek. "It's to the house," he said, "only if you want it. I'd like to think of it as yours, too. Ours, even. Eventually." She took the key, turning it over in her hand. There was no dramatic music, no tearful embrace. She simply leaned forward and kissed him, softly, tenderly, like an answer spoken in a language only they understood. Jacob, unaware of the quiet shift in the moment, continued drawing clouds and trees, occasionally lifting his head to ask for new colors. The gallery thrived in the months that followed. Olivia held a solo exhibition in a larger town nearby, and Benjamin stood in the back during her speech, clapping with quiet pride. He didn't introduce himself as her partner or Jacob's father. He just let her shine, knowing she didn't need anyone to complete her, only someone who saw her completely. Eventually, Olivia did move in. It happened not with fanfare, but with boxes brought over one by one, a crib reassembled in Benjamin's guest room, and coffee mugs slowly migrating from her kitchen to his. Jacob adapted with ease, treating the transition as an adventure. He loved having his books in two places, his toys in two corners of the same home. And each night, when both parents tucked him in together, he would fall asleep to the sound of their voices, wrapped in the quiet security of a life that had at last come together. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Jacob chase fireflies with a jar in his hand, Olivia turned to Benjamin and said, "I used to think stories like this didn't exist. That people don't change. That the damage we do to each other is final." Benjamin looked at her, not with guilt or apology, but with depth. "People don't always change," he said. "But sometimes they wake up. Sometimes they find their way back before it's too late." She reached for his hand and laced her fingers with his, feeling the strength there, the steadiness. "You came back," she whispered. He nodded. "You let me." Jacob ran toward them then, breathless and wild with excitement, his jar glowing with flickering light. "Look, Mama! Look, Papa!" he shouted, holding it up like a treasure. They both leaned in to admire it, their heads nearly touching, their laughter mingling in the warm night air. Olivia glanced at Benjamin, who was already looking at her, and for the first time, she felt like the story wasn't about what they had lost. It was about what they had chosen to build together, piece by imperfect piece. The future no longer frightened her. It didn't feel like a risk or a question mark. It felt like this: roots in the soil, light in the windows, laughter echoing through rooms that had once known only silence. And as they sat there, wrapped in a quiet joy that needed no explanation, Olivia knew, finally and completely, that they had all come home. This story isn't just about love. It's about how real emotions can survive mistakes, fear, and the passage of time. It shows that the path to becoming a family is rarely straight, never perfect, but always worth it when it's genuine. The ending leaves you with a quiet sense of triumph, not because the characters returned to what they once had, but because they built something new. Something hard-earned, conscious, and rooted in true growth. What struck me most was the moment Ben stopped being just a remorseful man and became a father, not by biology, but by choice and action. His journey is a powerful example of how a man's strength isn't in control or distance, but in showing up, listening, and being willing to change. And Olivia is the kind of woman who walked through loneliness without becoming bitter, without turning herself into a victim. She became stronger, deeper, but never lost her softness or her belief in love. The ending isn't a fairy tale. It's a quiet, living reminder that happiness doesn't arrive in grand gestures, but in what we choose to build, piece by piece, day by day. And that's where its true magic lies.